Hi, it's Vicky here, and today I'll be making an art journal about Paris. I've been wanting to make a layout about Paris since my last visit there, so today is the day. I'm starting out by using this tissue paper. This is called Paris and it's by 7 Gypsies. So I have cut out a piece and I'm going to stick it on my layout using my gel medium. The gel medium that I'm using is by Ranger. Starting out your layout by sticking down a tissue paper always makes things easier, and you don't have to fight with a blank page. It really helps creativity and inspiration. Also, at this point, just to mention that you don't have to stick down the tissue paper totally flat, even if it has creases on it. It adds texture and really helps the final result. And now, as usual, once my tissue paper is stick down, I'm going all over my layout with gesso. This will provide a great surface for my distress paints, which I'm going to be using later on. To color my background, I'll go with one of my favorite combinations, which is Wild Honey and Rusty Hinge. So first of all, I'm applying all over the layout the first lighter color, which is Wild Honey. And once everything is laid down, then I'll go and add here and there some Rusty Hinge, which is actually going to blend in nicely with the background and create some shadows. And finally, I'll go ahead and introduce a third color, which is even darker than Rusty Hinge, and it's the Antiqued Bronze. Antiqued Bronze will make my page even darker, and this will finish off my background. As you can see, I'm working always with a baby wipe, and that makes sure that I apply thin layers of color, which will not cover up the text in my background. I'll keep on adding paint until I'm happy with my background, and then I'll use my heat gun to quickly dry my layout. I also like to have always a darker border around my pages, so I'm using my favorite marker this is a big brush marker by Faber-Castell. I'm going around the edges and blending the brown color with my finger. This is Indian ink. It doesn't dry instantly over the distress paint, but so I have some time to blend it with my finger, but once it dries it will not move, as it will become permanent. Now I'm making sure that it's nicely blended with my baby wipe. And now I'll finish off the border by using my blending tool and some black archival ink. I'm using archival ink instead of a black soot distress ink because this dries permanent and it will not move no matter what technique I'll go ahead and do on top. So I cannot just finish a background if I don't do some stenciling with embossing paste. And today I'm using this stencil by Tim Holtz and my gold embossing paste. Now, as you can see, it looks a bit milky at the moment, but as it dries it becomes shiny, and you'll see what I mean once the page is nicely dried. A little goes a long way with this technique, and you can always scrape off the excess and put it back in the jar, so you have no waste at all. And now I'll leave that aside to dry, and I'll go ahead and do some die cutting. This C6 die is designed by Tim Holtz, and it cuts out an Eiffel Tower as well as a fleur-de-lis. So I'll go ahead and die cut the Eiffel Tower, and then I'm going to cut out 3 pieces of fleur-de-lis. Now I'm using Manila cardstock by Ranger. It's my favorite cardstock for paper piecing on my art journal, just because it takes paint beautifully. I'm using my black soot distress paint to color all my die cuts, and you can also use the dabber directly with the bottle to color them, but for some strange reason I decided I wanted to use my brush. All the supplies that I'm using on today's layout are listed just below the video on my YouTube channel as well as on my blog. Once this black paint is dry, I'll go ahead and add some antique bronze and blend it with my finger just to add a bit of interest on those black pieces. At this point you can check how the embossing paste has dried and it looks nice and shiny. So it's time to stick those die cuts on my layout. As usual, I'm using my matte gel medium to stick them down and I'm making sure that I'll stick them randomly. I don't want to create any pattern here. So I'm not going to stick them in one line or anything, but I will create a visual triangle. I am also making sure that I am sticking them nice and flat on my background so they become a part of it. To bring everything together, I'll be using this gold paint. This is by DecoArt and I'm going to add just a bit of gold on my die cuts. So this will help those die cuts to blend in with the rest of the background since it does have some gold accents from the stenciling. And finally, I'll do the same thing by adding some gold accents with my finger or my baby wipe all over the Eiffel Tower. I'm also adding some antique bronze, which I did use on the fleur-de-lis. So now all my elements look the same and I can now stick it down, but before I go ahead and stick that on my page, I'll go ahead and work on another focal point. So I'm using this die, which is also by Tim Holtz, and it cuts out a picture wheel. So you can see the die cut here. I had the idea to add photos that I took on my latest trip to Paris, and that's why I used my printer to print out those photos. First I shrink them down and just print them out in regular photocopy paper. I'm using my ruler and I'm going to divide this photo wheel in 3 different parts. The parts aren't exactly the same, I just eyeballed it. And now I'm just adding some post-it notes as a mask. So once that's there, I'll go ahead and use my gesso to color the middle part of my die cut. Now the idea is to recreate the flag of France, and that is why I'll be using 3 different colors, so that there goes gesso, white gesso for the middle part, and then I'll be using chipped sapphire and fired brick, all colors from the Distress Paint line by Tim Holtz. I'm using a piece of transparency and I'm going to put it on top and I'm going to mark where exactly I need to cut it out. I'll stick the transparency at the back of my photo wheel, and this is going to bring it more to life. I just love adding details like this. And then I'll go ahead and stick down all those little photos that I have already printed out with gel medium. And although I did color the flag correctly, at this point as I'm turning around the wheel to stick down the photos, I didn't really paying any attention, and I managed to stick down the flag the wrong way, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. I'm using my blending tool to ink up the edges, and I'm using Vintage Photo Distress ink, as well as I'll be adding a bit of black archival ink. So I'm actually doing this because I need to mute the colors a bit since they are too vibrant, and this will help my element to blend in better with the background. And now it's time to stick everything down on my layout. For my photo wheel, I decided to use my HG gun instead of my gel medium, just because it was super easy to do, and I didn't have to go with my brush all over the little windows. So this is nicely placed there. I'm using my scissors to cut out the excess, and then I'll use my gel medium to stick down the Eiffel Tower. And this is where I wasn't paying any attention, and that's why the flag is upside down. So although I'm working on my art journal, I didn't realize that I had that mistake, and you'll see at the end of the video when I finished off the layout. It was then when I realized what was happening, and you'll see how I'm going to save the whole thing. And now for my favorite highlights. I'm using my Signo White gel pen, and I'm adding some highlights here and there, which are going to bring all those elements to life. To embellish the center of my photo wheel, I am using some words from this booklet. This is a booklet by Tim Holtz, and it's the Chit Chat one. I have actually decided to go with 3 different words, that's travel, capture and discover. I'm also making sure that before I stick them down, I go ahead and ink up the edges using Vintage Photo with my blending tool. And while I'm doing that, if you notice, I have a lot of elements on the left page of my layout, and I need to balance this somehow and add just a few elements on the other page. So I decided to go with these 2 die cuts. These come from a pack, ephemera pack by Tim Holtz, and I believe it's the Expedition one. And I decided to go with these certain 2 ones just because they bring red and blue on the other page. So by creating a small cluster up there, I actually bring those 2 pages together. And of course my layout is more balanced. Once everything is dry, I'll use my black marker to go around the images, as well as add some accents, highlights with my gel pen. Also, I'll be using my big brush brown marker to go around the edges of my elements and add some shadowing. This is a technique that you have seen me do again and again. And finally, it's time to add my quote. For my quote, I use one of my favorite alphas. This is the Worn Text by Tim Holtz, and I always like to place down the stamps before I stamp them, just to make sure that everything fits nicely. So I'll then go ahead and stamp 2 letters at a time, and I'm doing that just because I want to have a better impression. Just because my art journal is quite bulky, I cannot get a nice image if I stamp all the word at one time. I'm using archival black ink. If you notice, those alphas do not stamp a perfectly solid letter, and that's because those stamps are designed to do that. That's why they are called worn text, so that you get a feeling of a worn quote that is old and distressed. However, I like to use my black marker and quickly go over them to help them stand out a bit more. And once I'm finished with that, I'll go ahead and use my white gel pen and add some highlights on the letters. This is one of my favorite techniques that bring all the letters to life. To finish off my layout, I'll go ahead and add one more element at the top cluster. So I'm using this ticket by Tim Holtz, which I'm going to staple it over those other elements. Now, I don't really mind stapling since at the back I don't have any layout. I was just experimenting at the back, and I'm going to stick those 2 pages together. Finally, I'm going to stamp the date on that ticket. And once I stamped the date on the ticket and I was looking at my final result, it was then when I realized that the flag was the wrong direction. So I just had to fix that, and to do so I actually created another wheel. This wheel doesn't have any transparency at the back or anything, it's just the wheel colored. I used my craft knife to separate the Eiffel Tower, and I have peeled off all the 3 stickers, so it's now time to stick down the wheel, but this time correctly, and you will still be able to see the photos through the windows. And when the photo wheel was stick down correctly, I then made sure that the Eiffel Tower was in place, and I have also cut out the excess with my scissors and then stick back the stickers on top of the photo wheel. And now it's as if it never happened, so let's keep that a secret. And that was the layout for today. I hope you had fun and got inspired. And if you did, don't forget to leave me a comment as well as give me thumbs up on my YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching.